Hello, everyone. Welcome to our yet another special Glass Academy webinar where we throw limelight on designing office spaces for the future. As we navigate through a rapidly evolving work landscape, the need for adaptable and flexible workspace solutions has never been more critical. Today, we'll explore the key trends and innovations shaping the future of our work environments, focusing on how we can create spaces that not only respond to our current needs but are also resilient to the changes ahead. The design of office spaces has undergone a significant transformation since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Previously, the focus was primarily on maximizing space efficiency and fostering collaboration through open plan layouts. However, the pandemic has highlighted the need for flexibility along with prioritizing health and well in the workspace. This shift aims to create environments that support hybrid work models, ensure employee safety, and promote overall wellness. Without further ado, we are honored to welcome to today's webinar an esteemed architect specializing in office and commercial projects, having first-hand experience in the transformative and impact of thoughtfully designed workspaces. Our goal today is to provide the viewers with insights and strategies to help design work environments that enhance productivity, well-being, and adaptability. Today, we have with us architect Sunayana, director, Dius Design Studio, based out of Chennai. Sunayana has about 19 years of experience in the field of architecture and interior design. During this time, she has successfully designed and handled over 20 million square feet of built-up spaces in IT and office-based build, interior fit-outs, industrial campus and factories, government buildings and infrastructure projects, residential campuses, etc. She has managed a diverse portfolio of projects of sizable magnitude for large Indian and foreign MNCs and corporates, both in India and abroad. Having worked in C.R. Narayan Rao Consultants Private Limited for over 14 years, her design portfolio includes prestigious projects like the Amazon campus in Hyderabad, NIIT campus in Greater Noida, HCC 24/7 Park in Mumbai, etc. Her focus has been on evolving innovative design solutions that are contextual and sustainable and creating spaces that are accelerating to experience while being functional. Her entrepreneurial stint started in 2018 with Dius Design and Studio. Sunaina is a co-founder and director of Dius Design Consultants Private Limited, which she started along with her husband Subbaya. Dius Design is one of the fastest growing architectural and engineering practices in Chennai, despite setting up full-fledged operations in 2020 in the middle of a global pandemic. Welcome, Architect Sunaina. We are delighted to have you here with us today, and we are looking forward to you sharing your wealth of knowledge and expertise to our webinar series. So let's dive into today's topic of discussion, the future of work, designing flexible and adaptive workspaces. So,
Hi, Shruti.
yes,
Thank you so much for having me here.
great. So we will start with the interview. Before we dive into today's webinar topic, let's start with some informal and fun questions that take you back to your early days in architecture. We would love to hear about your journey and experiences as an architect. Can you share your story with us?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. And so my journey as an architect started almost 25 years ago. So of course, from before that, as to choosing architecture itself, my father has been in the construction industry, and that kind of led me to visiting projects along with him. One of the projects that I do remember visiting is the RBI headquarters in Bangalore, the office for RBI in Bangalore, which was one of the large projects at that time that he was handling. And when I saw the team working towards in a site visit, the way who are the team people who were coming in, and I must have been hardly about 12 or 14 at that time, and I saw the architect and how everybody stopped talking the minute the architect was explaining something. So, because every time my dad used to ask me, "Would you want to become an engineer like me?" And at this point, I realized that's not what I want to be. I do want to be an architect. So I decided this very early on. By the time I was an eighth or so, I was very sure that I wanted to be an architect, and that's what I was working towards.
Great. Wow, that's a very inspiring and amazing journey. So now diving into today's topic, we would love to hear your insights on the rapid urbanization and setting up of many corporate workspaces in cities like Bengaluru and Chennai. What key aspects do you consider while designing office spaces to accommodate this mass movement? Please feel free to share some examples from projects that you have worked on in these cities.
Sure. The firm that we've started, Subhaya, and we've predominantly we work with commercial and industrial projects. We do residential also, on a larger scale. Um, so the scale of the projects that we're in, it typically we deal with larger population of people. It's not for individuals. So when we're looking at corporates, we do the interiors as well as the building itself. So there's a lot that's been changing over time in terms of technological advancements as well as uh, the way people work that has changed over time, which has kind of evolved into how the workspace is now. So we do quite a bit of interior projects for a lot of large MNCs. So these are spaces that we also go back and refurbish, spaces that they have probably done the interiors for maybe 10, 15 years back, which already feels dated and is not in line with the current requirements of their team. So even going back and renovating these kind of spaces, refurbishing the spaces to make it more current, and maybe we touch upon small aspects of it to make it, to put it together in terms of how they can use the space more effectively. Um, of course, the trend during COVID of the hybrid workspaces right now has been it's here to stay. But at the same time, people are trying to make sure that that the workforce comes back to the office in larger numbers. That eventually move towards that. But that flexibility and the choice of maybe one of the days working from home, that would still, I think, remain, and that is something we need to cater to. So maybe I can share a few slides to just
Sure.
touch upon this. So when we're talking about how the office environment has been changing, earlier it used to be, maybe 15 years ago, it used to be maximize the workstations in a given space. And there were meeting room requirements, and there was a very fixed ratio of for every 5 seats, we need 1 seat in the meeting room. So these were so now these kind of things are very, very fluid in terms of, and also in terms of the type of office that we're working with. So it's become important to kind of segregate the office space into, individual task spaces where you're working in an open sort of environment. At the same time, you need a little bit of focus. You need to step away for a minute. We have the focus pod kind of spaces, which individuals can go where they're not disturbed, where they don't feel distracted by movement around them. And then we have the collaborative spaces. So the collaborative spaces again are collaborative where you just need the team that you're sitting with. We just need to quickly step aside to brainstorm something, to have some sort of ideation, and then go back to your workspace. Or it could be a private collaborative where you actually have a enclosed meeting space. So for each of these, we need to cater to the kind of spaces, and so in terms of furniture, in terms of technological connections. And so all these spaces also, when we're talking about the collaborative, whether it's open or the private collaborative or the individual focus spots, these are all spaces that you can connect back to people who are in remote locations, whether remotely working in another office or whether they're working from home. So these are spaces that allow you to connect to these spaces. So here again, how best we can use the collaborative spaces and how comfortable these spaces need to be. The whole concept of, it's from working from home to moving to these kind of spaces, you have the comfortable type of seating, so you have the choice. That's what basically it is, the flexibility that you're giving the employees, that they have the choice of, you're working at your desk, or you can step aside into these alternate workspaces that you can still utilize. Of course, it needs to also work well with the type of office and the environment that we have. So these are some spaces that get some images, some renderings for offices that we have done. So where we have a mix, open collab, different types of seating for different comfort levels, depending on what type of discussion is required. So these are spaces that we're now trying to plug in to a lot of, where you see over here, you see the typical grid system and the older type of workstations that we have. And then we move into one portion where we just create a little bit of different type of seating as well as workspaces. So this is something that we're trying to make sure that we're incorporating into our projects.
Great.
So, yeah, so these are some things, these are the changing trends that we see as we move forward in the design.
Awesome. So, moving on to the next question. How do you define a flexible and adaptive workspace in today's context? And throwing a little light on how glass is used in these adaptive workspace designs, how can technology be integrated with glass elements in workplace design to enhance flexibility and adaptability? Could you let us know about a little role of how glass plays in creating sustainable workspaces?
Sure. So I do think that is something that it's very important now in terms of earlier. Of course, this has been using glass has been a trend that's especially in interiors has brought in over the past 15 years. Probably has become 15 to 20 years. It's become very popular to make sure that we have even the private spaces that we have. We still have the visual connect, that we don't necessarily enclose it with solid partitions. So that is something that is that's a given now. Very few clients ask for specific zones that need to be completely enclosed, but most of the time, even then, they prefer to have that visual connect. So people are also realizing in terms of the well-being of the employees itself, where we need to make sure that we maximize wherever we have glazing, even if there is a need for say enclosed spaces, a lot of enclosed spaces in some of the projects. It still doesn't take away from the fact that we need to be able to provide access to from any given point of time, you should be able to see the external light. So, and nowadays, the buildings tend to have a lot more glass because of the types of glass that is available in the market itself. It's a lot more in terms of cutting off the heat gain, while at the same time that we are also making sure that that we have maximum visibility. So there are glasses now without having to go for darker glasses. We're still able to make sure that the efficiency is not lost, and we still gain maximum daylight and views to the outside, which become very important as part of the thing. Couple of probably floor plans that we've done that I can just share, which we've give an idea of what I'm talking about. So this was one of the projects where we had a requirement for a lot of enclosed spaces, a lot of private offices. So our intent was to make sure that we don't compromise on the glazing. We had glazing on two sides, so we wanted to make sure that all aspects, all portions of the office have some connect to the external glazing itself. So if you see also, even in terms of each of these spaces, that at any given point of time, we do have a connection to the external glazing. If you see, once we walk into the space, we have the glass on that side. So we do have a lot of the open workstation, and then we have the cabinets that are placed along there. And at the same time, that also is with glass. So you have visibility across the office floor, even though we necessarily needed to have a lot of enclosed spaces. So this is something that I think has, for us designers, as an element, glass is always something that we like to play around with. And now with options like you see here, based on our concept, we've also used curved glasses to a large extent because the building itself has a curved facade. So this was something that we wanted to explore as we move forward into the interior space also. So functionally, we've not compromised on the spaces which need to have proper ergonomic furniture, but at the same time, we're looking at how best we can use the curved facade itself as a thing that flows through within the office space. And considering it's designed in Chennai, we've looked at, of course, the inspiration from the local landscape itself in terms of the seafront. So these were some of the things that that I do think have helped over time in terms of selection of material.
Love the examples and the project that you guys actually relevant to this particular question. So moving forward, how do you incorporate employee well-being and mental health considerations into your designs? For instance, how do you use natural light, transparency, and views of the outdoors to create a healthier and more stimulating environment? Some tips and tricks that you could tell the audience of how your design process would work like.
Sure. I do think some of it I did touch upon in the previous slides that I showed you, where we're trying to make sure that there is that visual connect. But apart from that, it's also in terms of a lot goes into also the design of the mechanical, the air conditioning design to make sure that the air quality is maintained. So this we work closely with the service engineers, with the mechanical engineers to make sure that the air conditioning system is designed. There may be, it depends on depending on the project. There may be a case that the air conditioning is provided by the builder, or if they're doing the entire building, whichever way. Nowadays, I think even builders are very conscious of being sustainable and making sure that whatever they provide, because clients are demanding. So even if we're not going in for a rating, there are some basic necessary steps that we follow to make sure that the employee well-being is considered, the amount of air changes, the fresh air intake, the filtration system that it goes through. So all of these things become important aspects to make sure that you don't have the sick building syndrome, and employees at any given point of time have the other thing also is in terms of selection of material. Apart from the glazing that allows you connection with the natural external environment, also in the internal environment itself, use of more sustainable material, use of more earthy tones and textures, which give a lot more. It feels more natural and comfortable. So the warmth that you get from using wooden rafters and using very subtle colors. We can still have accent colors, but no longer the trend. I do think about 20 years ago, maybe the trend of accent colors was to use a pop of color. As designers, we have done that a lot, where we've used suddenly as you walk, it's a nice. So it used to create a sense of vibrancy, but we realize now that not necessarily. It's just that flash at that moment, but working in that space for a longer period doesn't necessarily give you the calmer and more productive employee at the end of the day. So these are things, and of course also the lux levels that are maintained in the office, the color temperature of the light. These are all aspects that we look into to make sure that the well-being of the employees is of paramount importance in these spaces.
That's nice. That's nice. Now, could you tell us some of the trends you foresee in the future of workplace design, particularly post-pandemic? And how can you tell us that how organizations ensure that their workspaces remain adaptable to future changes, maybe in terms of work culture, technology, etc.?
This is something I think it would remain ever changing, but at the same time, I think in terms of the design of the workspace itself, starting with what are the type of spaces that we design, what are the kind of elements that we bring into the office. Of course, these would be very specific to the organization that we would be working with. But predominantly, if you're talking about IT clients, their requirements are more or less somewhat similar across. The way they collaborate, the way they work, the expectation of the kind of spaces that they need are somewhat similar. So these are so while designing these spaces, also we do look upon what are the type of what works for them.
For them. True.
In a lot of offices nowadays, at the entrance when you come in from the lift lobby and you come into the reception, and then we have a common touchdown kind of space, which is either a social hub or a space where people who are working in other remote locations, whether other offices or they come in, then they don't need to go looking around the office for a space to work in, or if they come in for a meeting for a day, the travel time plus the it doesn't make sense for them to go back and then connect to finish their work. So having these kind of hot desk kind of spaces, which are common areas where people can work. So having this at a very accessible location at the entrance itself, this is something that's becoming quite common, which we see it is quite adaptable to most offices and most clients. And similarly, within the workspaces itself, having spaces where we can quickly connect up for a VC. It doesn't have to be that you book a meeting room specially to go have this discussion. If it's just 4 or 5 people who need to quickly connect, it doesn't need it's not necessarily a confidential conversation that has to go on. It's not a day-long meeting. If it's half an hour, we need to connect over a call. We're not able to move forward with this. Let's quickly connect. We should be able to do that quickly. So these are spaces that can be interspersed within the workspace itself, which kind of give a lot of, people don't need to think about, oh, do I need to schedule a call? Are you free now? Let's connect for 10 minutes and let's move on. So this is something that I feel is something that would work with spaces. It would become popular over time also to have it in more offices. Of course, what I mentioned earlier in terms of focus pods, to have this space where, I just want to concentrate on my work. I have something to finish within the next few hours, which I just need to focus on, and I don't want distractions. I don't want to look at people walking up to the breakout or pantry or chit-chatting. So, these spaces, these pods have become quite common in workspaces, and we do think this is becoming more demanding in most of the workspaces that we see. So even when we basically lay out a workspace, we look at how best the transition of the spaces can come. So when we're looking at starting with the reception, then we look at meeting rooms close enough to the reception. We have collab areas that are close enough to the reception. We have the training room. These are all in accessible portion. Of course, in specific locations where they have other requirements, that's a different thing. So cafe is something that's tucked away. We don't want to mix this up with other functions. So it's only for the employees. And then aligning the cabin so that we're not impacting the natural light and space, so that workstation get the maximum daylight, the larger spaces get maximum daylighting. So this is something that, as a trend, that we do see this picking up more popularity within the workspaces. And it's something that, it's quite conducive for most employees. It's a matter of convenience.
Great. That's such an amazing insight to take away. So we are inclining towards the end of the webinar series today with respect to the interview session. To ask lastly, how do you balance the use of glass to provide both collaborative and private spaces in a flexible workspace? And some ideas that you can throw the audience to.
There are a few projects where we've tried, there's a lot we can do with the glass and the type of hardware that is available. It kind of goes hand in hand that you need to have the right hardware to be able to use glass in the way that you want. Whether you want to be able to, whether you want it to be sliding, folding, move it all to one side and still have that connectivity, or where you don't need it to be, like an acoustic partition that is dividing the space as such, not meeting rooms, but at the same time, opening up spaces to have larger collaborative, like an all hands or something that you should be able to move things around with flexible furniture. These are some things that we do see that are specific requirements with some clients. But at the same time, this is not a necessity with most of them. It's only in locations where they need this kind of flexibilities where we need to bring it. So it's important that we as designers we balance this out in terms of wish list of what all we can do with the glass and with what is available. Because we've done almost 20 years ago in some projects where we've done the switchable glass where they wanted that experience center for their clients. They should be able to come in and they give them a presentation, they explain everything, and then there's a switchable glass which then gives them an overview of the entire space. So one thing I feel that is becoming more required is the fire rated glass, which is, people are more conscious of making sure that we are compliant with NBC in terms of the lift lobbies, all of them being fire rated and enclosed. Earlier, not all of them were being very strict about this, but now, clients are making sure that whichever building they're moving to, that is already compliant with all the codes. In which case, as part of the fire norms, we need to make sure that this is met. So having fire-rated glass partitions give it that sense of openness, while at the same time making sure that we are code compliant. So these are aspects where it's very important that we use. So there is a cost associated with this type of glass, where we're using special glass, of course. So, but as designers, it is, I think, our duty to make sure that we advise the client based on their requirement, what would work for them, what is really required in this space. So like I was saying, the sliding folding glass partition, what we used, it was a space where they wanted the employees to be able to come to their IT help desk. It was a building that housed almost 15,000 employees. So they needed a very large IT help desk where people can just walk in with their laptops, and it shouldn't be like one enclosed space. But at the same time, during off-peak hours, not necessarily the whole space is open because you don't have the same type of crowd coming in. Because though the building had 24/7 operation, not all of them would be working on different shifts. So in which case, in the off-peak hours, there will still be people, there is still the IT help desk, there is still people who need the help, but you don't need that same sense of openness. For the sense of security also, they needed to close it up. So we use this, glass, sliding glass, which really worked well for that space. It was like a shop front within the office, where you could see through, what is going on, so you can very accessible. So that was one of the spaces that really worked. So these are some of the examples where we think we've used it well.
That's great. That's great. So thank you so much, Architect Sunaina, for sharing those insights. Before we wrap up the webinar for today, we were hoping that if you could quickly walk us through your works related to designing flexible workspaces and what it takes to execute it in today's fast-paced world. You may now share your screen and press Enter. Over to you.
Sure. So what I'll do is I'll quickly run you through a couple of our projects. Let me just share my screen. So this office was for a client called Tropical Agro. This is in Chennai, and the site was pretty tight. It was less than 2 grounds, less than 4,000, around 4,500 square feet is what the site is. And within that, they had a lot of requirement. They had a long wish list that they needed to incorporate into the space. So we did manage to maximize the FSI, including the premium FSI for the space itself. But one of the aspects that we looked at while designing their space also was that, considering they're in the agro industry, that they have that, even their logo, if you see, has that farmer standing as part of their logo. So we looked at a vertical garden on the outside of their facade as one of the elements that we worked with. So, like I said, the site itself was a very tight site based on which we needed to make sure that we fit in all of their requirements into this space because each floor had a very unique requirement. So, here, just a quick area statement is to show that we've maximized in a 4,500 square feet, we've managed to build about 10,700 square feet where we maximize the efficiency. These are some of the elements itself. The site itself is south facing. So we did have to make sure that the glass is very, the performance of the glass, we had to very carefully choose. So these were some of our initial considerations of the glass itself, where we looked at how to balance the light transmission with the solar factor that we wanted. So one of the initial glasses that we looked at gave us a solar factor of about 0.27, where we were trying to maximize the light transmission to about 39%. Close to 40% is what is ideal for most offices, but here we did compromise a little bit on that, and we brought it down to 33% to achieve a better solar factor of about 0.2. ECBC talks about a solar factor of about 0.24, so we were trying to gain. But 0.22 to 0.2 is what we were trying to get to. So these were some of our considerations while selecting the glass and making sure that the facade, what we're designing, is in line with what it makes sure that their envelope actually serves the purpose to make not allow that much heat in, but all the cabins and the workspaces, again, considering it's a very small footprint, we did try to maximize on what we can do. So these are some of the finished photographs of the site that you can see. So in the night, this almost looks like clear glass, but it's a very nice feeling that you can see in and out. It feels seamless when you're using the space. So these are some of the factors that we brought in. Of course, there were some elements, facade elements that we looked at bringing in, including the horizontal louvers and the vertical fins to bring in the effect. So these are some of the, so the green wall that we were, so it was nice that the building finally we were able to construct exactly as we envisaged, if you see, from what we had had in the rendered view to these are actual photos that we had. Nice. So these were some of the detailing that we go into with the facade vendor to make sure that that the elements that we want are captured in the way that we want. So these were the horizontal shading devices that we looked at. So that little bit of projection offering some shade on the south side, that was one of the aspects. So the floor plans, if you look at each floor, is completely unique in terms of the requirement of the lobby space to which department is housed in each of these floors. So accordingly, the number of cabins, the number of workstations, we had to, it was literally like playing with Lego, the multiple options that we worked out to arrive at the final workstations as well as the thing. So here again, though the cabins are placed towards the glazing, so you see what is the green is actually the view to the outside. So the height was another restriction that we had because the requirement was quite large. We had to fit in 5 floors and the restriction of the height was about 18.3 meters. So considering that we had very low ceiling heights, we managed the HVAC system as well as by maximizing wherever we have the cabins, by having the full height glass, we were able to maximize the daylight into these spaces. So this is one of the views of the cabins itself. So you see there's from almost everywhere, since it's a small floor plate, from almost everywhere you can see outside, you can see the greenery, the trees. Luckily there is the opposite, this is just an open ground. So that is something that is helped also in terms of, so the higher floors being for the management have larger cabins and more enclosed spaces and the boardroom. So these are the kind of spaces that we kind of have over here. So there again, we've tried to bring in the little bit of, even in the carpet, the selection of the carpet, so green as an element that we brought in so that we stay connected with that. So these, of course, in terms of the finishes in this particular one, compared to most of our other projects, it's a little more lavish in terms of what type of material that they wanted for that corporate floor itself. So this is another project that I would like to touch upon, which is a very vibrant space for a publication company. So if you see the kind of colors, the kind of material palette is very different from what I just showed you with the previous project. So that is something that we also pride ourselves on, that our designs are very varied with each of our projects. It doesn't get repetitive. So for us also, we don't get bored of what we're doing.
Yes.
So we start any project, we start with the basic zoning, we start with the basic understanding of how many toilets are provided, whether it's adequate for the kind of number of people that are there. So one of the things that I think is very important for most architects to actually be aware of is the NBC norms, what they need to look at in terms of fire egress, in terms of toilet requirements, and in terms of the lift provision. So base building, what is provided, these are some things that we all need to be very well aware that, because these are the first driving principles when we're designing something, we need to know to be able to. So these are some initial layouts that we worked with to maximize we did have a lot of requirement of workstations and enclosed cabins, so we were trying to see how best to work that out. So multiple options and iterations, and then we arrived at the final zoning that we did, where we moved the recreation to one side. So one of the aspects also was, in the previous one, we looked at having the reception as soon as you come out of the lift lobby, but then we decided to create the reception more central and have people, visitors, everybody walk through the corridor and treat the corridor as an interesting space. So I will also show you some images of how we have actually treated this space, where we have a central reception. Like I said, typically this is something that I feel works always, to have a collaborative or social hub kind of space in the center, very close to the reception, along with an enclosed meeting room. So these are aspects that we do touch upon in almost all our projects. We do try to incorporate these because it works well for most clients. And cabins and those kind of spaces are more tucked away. They don't need direct access. So this is something that we worked out. Some material palette selections, of course, there were some changes. So this is what I said. There is an entrance, and our first thought, of course, was to put the reception here. But then as we worked through the site and worked with the client, we realized that that doesn't really make sense. There was also a constraint in a way that we had a very low ceiling height at the entrance itself. So this is how we envisage treating that space, that we have a nice long corridor where we have some inspirational images of photographs of people who you derive inspiration from. So this is what it ultimately looked like.
Nice.
So I do think a lot of the photos, when you see it, it turned out better than what we had initially envisaged. Places where we had looked at some kind of collage on the wall itself. So this mural, we worked with an artist along with the client to make sure that the color palette is in line with what we wanted, and every aspect of what is written here and every image is something that the client said, this is our principles, these are our principles, and the artist worked with us to actually develop this is a freehand drawing, by the way. She has done it freehand on site for the weekend and painted it. It was quite an experience to work with her, to see her go through this entire process itself.
That's nice.
So like I said, in terms of the design also, we've tried to maximize the height, and we've changed the ducting to make it look a little more aesthetic. Right. At the same time maintaining that industrial look and maximizing the height within the space. So this is something that we looked at. So if you see the whole space, we've this is the entrance, the collab that we have at the entrance itself. So what we saw as those smaller windows, of course, the blinds are drawn for the photography itself. But otherwise, there was a ledge outside the window, which we placed some plants and greenery. So this is something that we've made sure that every inch of the space is utilized well to bring in some sort of comfort to the thing. So another thing that we try to bring in a little bit of playfulness into the space itself is to have some sort of suspended texting, again, with some sort of inspirational image, inspirational message. So this is something that we have almost across the floor, where we have something that just pops up, which feels this one. So here again, there were some certain darker colors that we initially envisaged, but then we felt it works well to make it lighter, to make the whole space look brighter. So that's what we ended up doing eventually with the space. So in some areas where there are whatever our 3D views, and then we try to replicate as it is, but somewhere where we feel this can be made better and where the client is in agreement with us, we try to work with them to make sure that is done. So this is one very interesting meeting room that we created for them, where we had one wall which was a chalkboard, where the employees could come and scribble on it, like more like a classroom. You always feel that when we're in class as students, that we want, the minute the teacher walks out, you want to go scribble on the board with the chalk. So that is something that we wanted to create, and the table also doubles up as a TT table. So this is what we created. We did a customized table which can be used for playing table tennis. Of course, it's not a full-size table tennis. It's like playing in your home, like over the dining table. That's how most of us used to play ping pong in our younger days. So this is something that we wanted to bring in. So the entire board, we kept a box of chocolate, the dustless chalk that they can actually use over here, in fluorescent colors also, that the employees really loved this, that they loved using this. So we were fortunate that even the client, as and when we threw these ideas at them, they were very happy with what we were putting together for them. So here again, we have we have these high ceiling spaces, and then we have the low ceiling spaces. So we had to treat them appropriately. So we created some spaces where you still have the views of the rest of the space. You can see Tidy Park and everything from here. So it's a nice view to work, to sit at and work.
Definitely.
So again, the concepts that we had in the workspace, we've kind of translated that even into these spaces, where we have this chalkboard kind of thing within the recreation or the cafeteria portion, and we have this kind of neon lighting which we have in within the workspace. We bring that in here again. So these are some things that we created within these, to have these open spaces. The boardroom, of course, a little more formal looking. We wanted to have the typical, wood finishes and things like that. So they have a lot of, they work with a lot of writers. So somewhere where they need to have some sort of confidential discussions and things like that, because they are a book publication. So these were some spaces that we created. This is the actual boardroom. So this is what we call family. So I think, yeah. So.
Okay. So we come to the end of the webinar series. Thank you so much, Architect Sunaina, for this insightful presentation. Throughout the session, you have provided us with valuable perspectives on integrating flexibility, adaptability, and innovation into workspace environments. Your emphasis on the role of technology, sustainability, employee well-being has given us a deeper understanding of how architecture can shape the future of work. We greatly appreciate the effort and thoughtfulness you have put into preparing and delivering this webinar, inspiring us to rethink and reimagine the spaces where we work. Your passion for creating environments that not only meet functional needs, but also enhance productivity and well-being is truly commendable. On behalf of all of us at Glass Academy and Ethos Empowers, we deeply appreciate your valuable time and thank you so much for joining with us today. Thank you so much, Architect Sunaina.